Hi, my name is Riley. I just finished EMT school, and I wanted to make some review videos for myself, for other EMTs, and I wanted to publish some information for people that just might want to know about emergency medicine in general. So here that is. This video will be about blood pressure. The first thing we'll go over is the anatomy of blood pressure. So what is blood pressure in the theoretical sense, what's going on in our body. Second section will be how to take a blood pressure. One of these things, sphygmomanometer, whatever it's called, blood pressure cuff. And the third part will be physiology. So what do I do with that information? How is it working? How does it affect my patient? So let's start off with the anatomy. The anatomy of blood pressure is fairly simple. It's just how it sounds. It's the pressure of the blood against the blood vessel walls. Don't get too wordy with the explanation. So the amount of pressure that the blood exerts on the walls while it's going throughout the body, right? The blood has to get to all the different corners of our body, from our toes to our nose, because everything in the body needs oxygen, and blood is liquid oxygen, as I'm going to say in all of these videos, right? So what happens is the heart pumps blood throughout the body, right? There's two numbers in a blood pressure. So the top number, systolic, is when the heart is actually pumping and it's forcing the blood throughout the body. This should always be the bigger number, right? The second number, the bottom number, diastolic blood pressure, is when the heart is relaxing and the blood is still coursing through the body, but with the lowest amount of pressure. Usually in emergency medicine, we're really concerned with the top number. We want to know how hard the heart is working to get blood across the body, and blood is liquid oxygen. So next we'll talk about taking blood pressure. You'll see that I'm wearing my stethoscope. I look like big boy EMS.
Hey, old man, give me everything.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
So we're going to do what's called on-palp blood pressure. So we're going to need this. But for the first step, we'll just need our blood pressure cuff. This guy here. So I'm going to be taking my own blood pressure. Let's see how that works. I would suggest taking like a family member's blood pressure or a coworker. Often people are pretty open to getting their blood pressure taken. I used to take my coworker's blood pressure a lot when I was in EMT school. That helped me a lot with getting pretty good at it. So you're going to wrap the blood pressure cuff around them. You'll see that it has a thing that says artery most of the time, and this will point down. You want to put that on the brachial artery, which is like in their arm. I don't know, it kind of pokes out at you. And then you're going to wrap it around and size it, which is rather difficult to do on yourself.
2 hours later.
There we go. And so what I'm going to do now, pull it rather tight to my skin, and then wrap it around. Velcro. There we go. We have the blood pressure cuff, right? So now what I'm going to do is you've got this here. Now this is your pressure gauge. It has numbers on it, and it will tell you specifically what blood pressure they're at, right? So I'm going to
Pump you up.
And while I do that, I'm going to access my radial pulse, this one right here, right? So I'm going to feel it. Yep, I'm alive. And what I'm doing is I'm going to pump up this blood pressure cuff right here, right, until I can't feel it anymore. The reason I do that is because I want to see how hard the heart is working to get blood to this part of my body, right? So I pump it up, and when I in fact cannot feel it anymore, I'm going to take a look at the gauge there and see what my systolic, my blood pressure is, my systolic, the top number, because this is painful, because the heart is pumping blood, right? It's trying to get blood to every part of my body. When I take this cuff and I inflate it, it limits the ability of the heart to actually get blood to this part of the body. So now I'm seeing just how hard is the heart trying to get blood to this part of the body. And that evens out for me at about 110. So that's where I stop and I lose the feeling of the blood pressure. Once again, I showed you, but I'll explain it again. To take a systolic blood pressure, the top number, you're going to pump this blood pressure cup up until you can't feel the radial pulse anymore, right? And then you're going to note on your gauge where that was exactly. That's how you take a systolic blood pressure, the top number of the blood pressure. Now we're going to talk about diastolic. This is where we get to be big boy doctor-looking people, and we get to put on the stethoscope. Isn't that fun? I would suggest getting your own stethoscope because, like most private ambulance companies, have $5 stethoscopes. I've got a $15 stethoscope here, so I guess you could say I'm a professional.
You're not funny and nobody likes you.
So what I'm going to do for diastolic pressure is I'll take the blood pressure cuff and I'll pump it up, and I'll see the last point at which I can hear or oscillate with my stethoscope my heart pumping, right? So you should be hearing some kind of ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And then once that stops, once you get to a number where that stops, that's your diastolic blood pressure. With stethoscopes, you have to be kind of careful because the really expensive ones, especially, like you could put it on the floor and hear a mouse across the room. So like if you're just walking around with a stethoscope in your ears and you hit something, it's loud. With the cheap ones, you can't hear anything. So that's kind of nice. So I'm going to pump this up once again until I can't oscillate with my stethoscope anymore the heartbeat, and that's my lower number of my blood pressure. So for me, that's clocking in at about 70. So my blood pressure, my top number, I think was like 110. So my bottom number is 70. My blood pressure is 110 over 70. Systolic over diastolic. Oh yeah, just gotta put this back around my neck so I look really fancy.
Trust me, I'm a doctor.
And deflate this so I'm not air splinting my arm. Yeah, so that's how you take a blood pressure. Rather simple. Feel free to watch it over and over again. I would suggest practicing this once again. Family, friends, coworkers, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. Anyone you can. Practice taking your blood pressure a lot. Practice taking it on bad stethoscopes because you never know when you'll end up on a rig and not have your stethoscope, and then you've got to use $5 private EMS stethoscope. All right, next. So we've talked about what blood pressure is. We've talked about how to take a blood pressure, and now we're going to talk about the implications of a blood pressure. So if your patient has a high blood pressure, if your patient has a low blood pressure, if you're all that stuff. First, we should probably address what a blood pressure is usually, right? Blood pressures vary for different ages, and I'll put a chart over there about like what usual blood pressures are. I would really dedicate this to memory if you plan on like any EMS work. But for now, we'll just say that the regular blood pressure for an adult is like 120 over 80. Remember, we're really concerned about that systolic number a lot, especially in trauma. We're just trying to get a really quick idea of what's going on. So be really concerned with the top number. If the top number is like well over 120 or well below 120, you have a problem, right? So let's talk about what those problems are and how we can counteract those problems. So high blood pressure. Let's talk about why it may arise and what we should do about it. Why would someone have high blood pressure? As we mentioned earlier, atherosclerosis can raise someone's blood pressure. Stress can raise someone's blood pressure. Physical activity can raise someone's blood pressure temporarily. Many things, right? When we think about blood pressure and what blood is as liquid oxygen, as a fuel, we understand that a high blood pressure is often the body meeting a demand for energy. So in less big boy terms, if you need stuff, blood pressure goes up to bring you that stuff, right? So high blood pressure does not always have to be chronic. It doesn't have to be something you always have. If an athlete is competing, it is likely that while they are competing, their blood pressure is elevated. It is high.
Now you're all in big trouble.
It would not be healthy for them to have that blood pressure sitting down. Now, some people have chronically high blood pressure, whether that be because of weight or genetic factors, genetic factors causing them to gain weight, whatever it may be. People may have high blood pressure chronically. People may have high blood pressure in the moment. And what does that mean for us as EMTs? Well, we want to reduce the workload on the heart. So whatever we can do to make their heart do less work is good, usually. A lot of usuallys in emergency medicine. So let's say the patient has a super high blood pressure, they're gasping for air. What can you do to assist that patient? 99 times out of 100, going to give them oxygen. Why? Because oxygen enables that patient to work less to get oxygen throughout the body. If we're breathing in oxygen and more of our blood is oxygenated, the heart should work less. Pretty simple idea if you think about it. So oxygen should bring their systolic blood pressure at least a little bit down, right? Another thing we can do for this patient, if they have blood pressure medications, if their blood pressure is extremely high, or if they're having like some kind of heart issue, let's say they're having a heart attack, myocardial infarction, just heart pain in general, we may give them something called nitroglycerin. This does not necessarily aim to lower the blood pressure, but it does. By dilating or expanding the coronary arteries, nitroglycerin accomplishes relieving blood clots in the heart, relieving heart attacks, right? So if someone's blood pressure is high and they're experiencing pain in their chest, then we could give them nitroglycerin should they have it, or have it prescribed to them, or should it be indicated by our medical director. So if Big Boy Doctor told EMT to do so, we can give the patient nitroglycerin, right? Now, that's not our only means of regulating blood pressure, and it is just a means for chest pain, so have that noted. Low blood pressure. So what can cause low blood pressure, and what should we do about it? So low blood pressure is relative, right? If the regular blood pressure for an adult is 120/80, then obviously like 110/70, which I just got, is not an emergency call. But if the patient is sitting at under 100 systolic, you should be pretty worried, right? We always work in reference to baseline. So if our patient is obese, their blood pressure will be higher than someone who is not obese. So we should be worried if they get 120/80. If someone's sitting at 400 pounds and their blood pressure is 120/80, then something's drastically wrong, right? Remember, blood is liquid oxygen. So if our blood pressure is very low, then our body is not attempting to get oxygen to parts of the body. And when it's super low, that means that it just isn't, right? Not only is it not making a significant attempt, but it isn't getting there at all. To put it simply, if your blood pressure is 0, you are dead.
Steve Jobs is dead. Walt Disney is dead. I'm dead.
So if your blood pressure is close to 0, that's a problem, right? This often happens to patients in what we call decompensated shock. So shock is when the body cannot get oxygen where it needs to go. Simple as that. And decompensated shock is when the body has given up on getting that blood where it needs to go, getting that liquid oxygen to where it needs to go. What can you do about this? Not much. We want to catch them before they go to decompensated shock. And we'll have a whole video on shock later. But basically, low blood pressure could very likely be decompensated shock, where their body is just not trying to get oxygen to parts of their body anymore. Yes. And this is a serious issue. Obviously, pretty much everything in these videos is a 911 call, because it's a review for people that work 911. But this one's definitely takes the cake. You're going to want to give them supplemental oxygen for low blood pressure as well. Pretty much give everyone supplemental oxygen, to be honest with you. And for low blood pressure, you're going to elevate the legs a little bit, what we call Trendelenburg, I think it's pronounced. And that's when you elevate the feet about 10 inches. And this will actually send some of the blood pressure back to the chest, to the thoracic cavity. That's a temporary fix, though. You might get like 10 systolic blood pressure points, and that's about all you're going to get. This is just going to be temporary. These are temporary solutions. You have to get, especially for low blood pressure, you have to get them to a doctor, right? There's not really much we can do in the field. So, yeah, that's everything I've got about blood pressure. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have any suggestions for future videos, I saw a comment about choking, so I'll probably do a video about choking. I don't know how I'm going to approach this, if I'll make like various 15-minute long videos or so, or if I'll make like tinier videos, just like snippets, like this is pulse oximetry, this is the anatomy of your arm, like just tiny things, or bigger things like whole chapters that might take half an hour to an hour. So please let me know what you'd like, and please like and subscribe so the algorithm favors me and people looking for this kind of advice. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.